So recently, a bunch of unaired pilots found their way online, dating back to the 90s. What I want to do is look at these pilots and determine two things. One, did it have potential? And two, how different would popular culture be if this pilot was picked up for series? Today we're opening up the pilot vault and looking at the pilot for a show called The End of Steve. An ambitious comedy about an afternoon local TV host who is kind on screen, but embittered and irrational when the camera's cut. Now, Matthew Perry was trying for years after Friends to get his next big role on a TV show. Unlike, say, David Schwimmer, who went more into directing and producing movies, and Jennifer Aniston, who moved on to starring in movies. For Matthew Perry, a TV gig was always the ultimate goal. And believe me, I've seen them all. I've seen so many of his TV shows. I loved Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, but it was cancelled after one season. He was great in Mr. Sunshine, but it was cancelled after one season. He was great in the massively underrated Go On, but, well, you can probably guess what happened. The closest he's come to succeeding was with his reboot of The Odd Couple a few years back, which was honestly fine. I enjoyed it anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if it was because of this pilot we're looking at today that those shows even got a one-season order. Like, he put his foot down and said, I'll only do the pilot if I have a one-season guarantee. I still can't believe Go On was cancelled. I was gutted when I heard that it wasn't getting a season 2. Right, let's talk about The End of Steve and see if this could have been another gem of a show from Matthew Perry. We start with Steve on the show, interviewing someone about a flood, and he interrupts him to talk about a water feature they have on set. Already I'm liking the vibe of this show. Matthew Perry brings his usual charm to it, and it's a bit uncomfortable. Steve makes a donation to the Red Cross to help the flooding. Then the show ends. We meet Nathan, Steve's assistant, and we have some fun banter between them. And by fun, I mean he makes about 5 jokes about him being fat. The show certainly isn't very PC. The producer yells at him, and it becomes clear that these two are going to be at each other's throats every episode. Sort of like Mimi and Drew Carey from The Drew Carey Show. There's a nice bit where Steve says hello to 2 people on set. He says, hey guys, I don't even know your names. It's weird how much this Steve character is like James Corden. Years before he would go on to do a late night gig. I think he was still doing Gavin and Stacey in 2008. It's a weird thing with Corden because he was basically a national treasure over here in the UK before he went across the pond, and he just revealed himself to just be a bad person. But yeah, he's exactly like Steve. Remember when he was doing that segment on his show Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts, where I think it was Jimmy Fallon who asked him to name 3 members of his crew, and he wasn't able to. Just so full of himself, he doesn't care about the little people. Yeah, this Steve guy is just James Corden, isn't he? Steve bumps into Martin, who says that his donation to the Red Cross was nice, considering the recent crash in the economy and recession, but he claims to have never heard of the recession. Matthew Perry plays this clueless idiot so well, he nails it. They then have an exchange that is very David Brent. It's very clear where the inspirations of this show lie. Interestingly enough, this is the second pilot we've looked at that's centered around a daytime talk show, the other being The Bridget Show. This pilot is definitely better though. Matthew Perry is funny even with the very worst material. That's not saying this isn't good, by the way. I'm really enjoying it, but it's not a perfect script. We then get more fat jokes about Nathan, which, honestly, a bit dated, isn't it? It wouldn't surprise me if Matthew Perry pushed for more fat joke, because his humour is the definition of dated. Remember a couple of years ago when he published that autobiography, and it had a bunch of jokes about Keanu Reeves in it? See, back in the 90s, those jokes were popular because Keanu was doing crap acting in movies like Speed, but we love the guy now because of how sweet he is. Matthew Perry got into a bit of controversy over those jokes, but it's not his fault. He's just stuck in the 90s, isn't he? He's a real life BoJack Horseman, alcoholism and all. And talking to young women, apparently. If that clip is to be believed. Did you see that clip where Matthew Perry's talking to a very young woman? She's of age, I think she was like 18, and he's going, "So how old's your dad? Am I the same age as your dad?" It's really creepy, dude. What's going on with you? You're a real life Bojack. Steve asks Nathan to get in touch with Jenna Fisher and ask her if she's single. She might have been, because she got divorced from James Gunn only a year prior to this. But then again, she got married a second time in 2010, the year after. What is it with these celebrities and getting married so quickly? Steve hires an escort, but he doesn't want to sleep with her. He just wants her to spend the night in his bed so he feels less alone. Kinda sad, really. His bedroom is covered in framed photographs of himself. Imagine if he and Luckwell shared an apartment. It'd just be full of photographs of themselves on every wall. Steve punches Nathan in the face because he gave a check to Red Cross. Steve makes a point about how celebrities don't actually make donations. They just say that they will and then forget. That's pretty much what Amber Heard did, as was revealed in that trial.
I pledged the entirety to charity.
The statement...
When you say you buy a house, you don't pay for the entire house.
So maybe this is more based in reality than we think. And to use a more recent example, look at Oprah and The Rock promising to commit $10 million, i.e. they'll round up any donations the normal people make. There are no good billionaires. Tax the rich. Nathan quits his job because he's sick of Steve's abusive behaviour. He then wins him back with the promise of money. Nathan gives him the option. He will remain as his assistant if he stops with either the fat jokes or the stupid jokes. Steve, of course, wants to carry on with what? That's right, the fat jokes. Why did they do it like that? Like it was an episode of Sesame Street or Dora the Explorer. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry. Should I do that more often? Do call outs to the viewers? Oh, I'm so tired. Steve goes to the site of a disaster and attempts to get the check for his donation back. It's basically unbearable how awkward this exchange is. Scott's tot is nothing in comparison to this. It really is tough to get through. But still, it's funny enough. I'm not sure why this wasn't picked up for series. It's decent. Steve actually makes a good point here. How it's mad how charities have existed for years, but they still haven't solved the problems they're trying to solve. I'm pretty sure this is an old Ricky Gervais joke that they stole. It's revealed that Steve was recorded by a HD camera somehow, asking for money back from the charity. I'm not sure why he did that in front of a camera. For a man who works in front of a camera for a living, he should know where a hot mic is by this point. Steve is in big trouble with the network for embarrassing them, and he's warned that this show will be pulled and replaced with reruns of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. His producer obviously loves this because she hates Steve. Matthew Perry delivers a line in a very Chandler-like way, and it really made me laugh.
George Clooney called?
Oh, yes. Get excited, because you're exactly what George is looking for.
Matthew Perry then delivers a monologue that honestly could have done with a bit more bite. It must have been difficult for him going from Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, where he constantly had these beautiful monologues written by the greatest show writer of all time, Aaron Sorkin, to reading a monologue that was just pretty mid. I guess that's what actors have to deal with though, isn't it? They can't always be given gold. They just have to do the best they can with what they've got. Steve is told that he has to record a PSA for Red Cross on his show tomorrow, which he outright refuses to do. Oh yeah, because forcing celebrities to do PSAs always goes well. It's like when they forced Ted Danson to do one so he could get out of a speeding ticket. It always ends up with them just looking like they're being held hostage. There's this woman, Emily, a presenter on another show, and he's been trying to impress her this whole episode, but he can't get up the courage to talk to her. He eventually talks to her, and it's some riveting conversation.
What?
Hi.
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 God, he had better riz with Jill Goodacre. Steve thinks that someone has broken into his apartment, but it's just Dreamer Walker. She was fantastic in Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 and Compliant. She is the daughter of the guy who owns the apartment that Steve lives in. She looks so young in this. Steve talks about how he almost got a gig on the Today Show, but because he had too many drinks, he messed up the audition. I'm sure there's a kernel of truth in this because Matthew Perry is a teetotal alcoholic, so I'm sure he knows how alcohol messes everything up. Believe me, I know. He considers quitting the show but decides to stay so we can continue to see Emily every day. Not all of this is a poem. He does a PSA and he keeps his job, which makes me wonder why this show is called The End of Steve, because nothing really ends, nothing really changes. We're just kind of exactly where we were at the start of the episode. No lessons were learned. Steve is still the same terrible person as he was when we started. Nothing changed. Then the episode just ends. Honestly, I quite enjoyed this despite its problems, because Matthew Perry was just brilliant as always. So where does this rank among the other unaired pilots we've talked about? Well, I enjoyed it more than Carlton Your Doorman, and I'd have watched this over the Victoria Pyle Cop show. Yeah, I'm just gonna stick it right after that show. I think that's fair enough. Right, if you want me to talk about more unaired pilots, then let me know in the comments. And subscribe, help us reach 4K. Right, I'll let you go. Bye.